who was Tolina's? I'll find it.
We'll call him Jorge. He's Jorge.
Jorge. George, or call him Jorge. Jorge the artist. Worst advice ever given when you both were beginning. And this is one we were kind of chatting about before this, and I think like none of the advice I was ever given was, I guess, bad. Like a lot of it was more like it wasn't harmful. I guess when I hear worst, I sort of associate that with like, wow, I really wish that guy wouldn't have done that because he, really caused me negative. I couldn't get anything out of it. So it's more that I think there's a lot of advice that's given that's kind of redundant or causes a lot of wasted motion. And I think for me, I mean, obviously having protein every 2.5 to 3 hours. I mean, the last video we talked about that, but that was probably one of them. Training to failure every set was one of them. But now there's a balance. I think with everything, and I mean, the more you hang out around the sport and you further into your training career, you realize like not all advice is bad advice. It's just scaled in the wrong manner. Like it just needs the knob needs to be turned down a little bit on it. So those were kind of the two big ones for me. I don't know. I guess having beyond that kind of beginner stage, like dedicated, like gain 1 pound a week, like that's a good way to put on muscle, but it's a good way to put on a lot of fat as well. And I think there's a time and place for getting aggressive early on, but certainly not when you get into those intermediate to advanced stages.
And you know what, I think even now, like, and I like to do this basically on a yearly basis. I'll go back and I'll reflect on the last year. And there's always something that I look back on. I'm like, wow, that was a little off with that. So you're always going to have those things. You should anyways, or otherwise you're going to be that guy that's, I don't know, still doing max OT. It's 2015. So good program, in, I guess, in context, because I did make gains off that at some point. But yeah, so even now, like I can look back at things from my last prep and I'm like, I'm going to do this differently next time. And when I go back like 15 years, I think if I could have had an intervention with myself then, I probably would have, for sure, because my first gym had free personal trainers, and I think there you go, free personal trainers, tells you a lot. They were very motivating. They definitely got me. They gave me a lot of positive reinforcement, a lot of love. Otto, if you're out there, like, thank you, dude. But at the same time, I think I wish I would have like seen a strength coach early on. That's probably the one thing. Had I learned the basic movements, I think that would have saved me a lot of grief in the long run.
Yeah, and I think another thing. I mean, there's definitely suboptimal advice that I've received, but I don't regret it. Like I think at this point, like I look back at a lot of wasted motion early on in my training career, and like those are like some of the most like happiest times of my training. It's a lot of fun. Like I mean, I would be reading like the Arnold Encyclopedia while I, was chewing on a piece of like cold chicken, just like for the 5th time that day. So it's like let's leave some romance in the sport a little bit. And I think that the new kind of generation getting into training, it's not there's part of me that kind of wants to see some people kind of go through that phase, because you're going to make progress regardless early on. And by having someone tell you, this is your limit here. Like a lot of the, the equation, what's the equation?
Oh, like how jacked can you get his
But whatever
the Casey Butts.
Yeah. Like I think there's some merit to that. I mean, there's certainly some merit to that, but I don't really see the sense in like throwing that into a beginner's circle, and saying, okay, this is what you're going to, this is, you realize you're getting into this, like you're going to be kind of screwed because your gains right now are the best they're ever going to be, and in a year you're still barely going to look like you lift. And so it's not encouraging at all for a beginner. And so I think having that sort of romance of possibility by having some suboptimal advice early on for me actually helped me in terms of a sustainability standpoint, because first 5 years of my training career, like I didn't really know what steroids were. It's like I just knew like that's just going to take a few more years. So it's I have mixed opinions on that, but I think no advice, I guess, is bad advice. So just kind of analyze everything you hear, but kind of build your own sort of arsenal of knowledge.
And you know what? As long as at the end of every year you can go back and you can re-examine the way you did a few things, that's progress in a way, and I think we tend to forget that. So yeah, you should be able to do that, I think, on a yearly basis.
So we have one more I wanted to touch on that Prada.
T wears Prada.
T
Like D, yeah. Like the devil.
I thought it was Twares Prada this whole time. Assuming fatigue isn't taken into account.
I like that name.
Assuming fatigue isn't taken into account, is there a difference between training 4 to 5 days per week as opposed to distributing 4 to 5 workouts into 1 to 2 days? This is kind of one question, like with the whole sort of push towards people understanding the importance of training volume. The people think, okay, if I can get it all in here, as long as the volume's there, that's all that matters. And it is a big factor, probably the biggest factor, but there's also benefits to separating and kind of splitting it up. Like it's probably better to do that in 1 to 2 days if you had to, but I wouldn't say the results would not be the same between spreading it out, mostly because you're going to maximize your performance on those days by kind of minimizing fatigue going into each training exercise, but also you're going to have multiple protein synthetic responses to training itself. And so which is one of the benefits of high frequency training to begin with, in addition to just the skill component. But yeah, in a pinch, I definitely can sort of stockpile stuff, and
but it's much better when you're able to spread it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I definitely think so.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. At a certain point, you're going to require enough volume, or it's just not practical to have it in maybe a 3-day split, which works well for beginners. Beginners can be great, right, with a 3-day week split. But like for example, in our case, we need a little bit more volume in order to get those adaptations we're looking for. And ideally, here's the thing: like if it were up to me and I could have full control over my schedule, I would probably train twice a day and just split my daily volume into 2 sessions.
Yeah. Because
the quality of the work is going to increase.
So much better. Yeah.
So honestly, in your case, I would almost like take a risk and try to guesstimate like what is the least amount of volume you think you require in order to progress, and then use that with whatever free time you do have to train.
Yeah. Or go to like 3 to 4 days instead of 1 to 2. And I think with a lot of, I know both of us have used like a flexible template before, where you can kind of pick off, your list of assistance work throughout the week. And I think that there's times where I'm behind and I tend to do more in 1 day than I probably need to in 1 session. And there's also like there's a threshold within each session too that you're beyond which you're just not gonna you're not gonna be really promoting any further adaptations. So I think that's it.
All right, guys. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this, learned something new, and we will be having these a lot more regularly, I think, right?
Yeah, I would definitely like to. It's nice out here right now, though, so soon it's going to be dark and cold in here, so we might have to move indoors.
But for now, Brian Alberto Nunez signing off from Pound Town,
USA.
USA.